So, tonight we are on to chapter 7 of the book of Revelation. So let's read that whole thing. He says, after this, I saw, now remember, last week we did the first 6 seals. We saw the 4 horsemen and all that stuff. So now, before the opening of the 7th seal, this is what he sees. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth so that no wind could blow on earth or sea or against any tree. I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to damage earth and sea, saying, do not damage the earth, or the sea, or the trees, until we have marked the servants of our God with a seal on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000, sealed out of every tribe of the people of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 sealed. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. From the tribe of Simeon, 12,000. From the tribe of Levi, 12,000. From the tribe of Issachar, 12,000. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. From the tribe of Joseph, 12,000. And from the tribe of Benjamin, anybody have any guesses? 12,000. After this, I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands. They cried out in a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshipped God, singing, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, who are these, robed in white, and where have they come from? I said to him, sir, you're the one that knows. Then he said to me, these are they who have come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, they are before the throne of God and worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of the water of life. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Wow. Good stuff. Loads of terrific imagery in there. So, chapter 7 here is a bit of an interlude in between the 6th seal that we opened last week and the 7th seal that we'll get to next time. The interlude shows God's people as triumphant. They have come out of the ordeal. They have, if not necessarily survived, they have endured. They have endured the suffering that was put upon them, and now they stand as martyrs before the throne of God. So those listening at this point, as it's being read in the church, as the book of Revelation was, you can imagine they're sitting there and they're thinking that, okay, 6th seal, now comes number 7. But there's a surprise. There's a pause here. And there's kind of this dramatic, again, I'll use the word interlude or intermission, like in a long movie like Gone with the Wind. You know, I remember watching Gone with the Wind, and I saw it in the movie theater because it was a rerun at this place, and I was like, oh, great. She says, as God is my witness, I shall never be hungry again. Okay, movie's over. What? Intermission? How long is this thing going anyway? So I think I was 15 years old or something. Anyway, so that's what these folks are kind of getting here. I guess they got a chance to get up and go get communion wine and popcorn and, come back and hear the rest of the show. The seventh seal's not broken yet. Rather, this isn't the end of the episode that we're currently in with all the seals. But what it does is it really does hold the tension. I mean, they're kind of tense about this. You can imagine hearing this for the first time, and folks are sitting on the edge of their seat listening to this. So the first 8 verses talk about the 4 angels that stand at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds. Now, just because it says they're at the 4 corners of the earth doesn't mean these are flat earthers. They are already known by this time. Ptolemy has already been born around this time, and Ptolemy has kind of shown that the earth must be round. A lot of times we think that Columbus was the first guy to propose that. No, way, way back. And in fact, I think it was Ptolemy who said, why is it when you're approaching a mountain, you only see the top of it, but as you get closer, you see more down? The only answer is that the earth must be round, because as you're approaching that curve, then you can see more and more and more of this mountain. And of course, then he said, look at the moon, round. Look at the sun, round. Look at all the other things we see, they're all round. It must be round. Well, there was one of my favorite stories about astronomy is apparently at Oxford University, way back at its founding, we're talking about like in the 1300s, that one guy proposed that the earth was indeed flat, as all the ancient texts told us. And he says, and the earth is balanced on the back of a giant tortoise. Remember this story? Is that when you were at Oxford? And it's on the back of a giant tortoise. And someone says, well, what does the tortoise stand on? And he goes, you're very clever, young man, very clever, but its tortoise is all the way down. So this guy was bound and determined that his idea of the way the earth looked had to be right, and no amount of explanation is going to take care of it. So anyway, these 4 winds now, in John's vision, are told to do no harm to the seas, to the land, to the trees, until the servants of God had the seal placed on them. That they were going to be marked with a seal on their forehead. Now, when we think about Revelation, and we think about a seal, we usually think about something else. But the mark of the beast, that seal that was supposed to be in their head or in their hand, is actually a counterfeit of what John was seeing as the seal that was put on the children of God, the servants of God. And in the early church, when they talked about a seal that was put on us, they were talking about baptism. That it was, in fact, in our own baptismal rites to this day, we still talk about being sealed with the mark of baptism. So that was what they were like, until the fullness of the children of God had been sealed with the mark of the baptism, don't wreck the earth. You get the feeling then that John is saying, you know what? The good things that are going on in earth and the protection that the earth enjoys is because of the children of God. Well, that was actually a big deal in early church theology. There were certain early Christian writers, I'm thinking about like Justin Martyr and some others like that, who said the very same thing, that the earth is sustained for the protection of the children of God. And so that's drawn right out of John here. So we can read in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 22, pardon me, and in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 13, that talks about that same idea about the seal that is given to us at our baptism. So, faithful Christians, John says, and Paul says, are marked with this seal, and because of that marking, they were able to endure all the woes, all the trials, all the tribulations that befell the earth, that befell them, thanks to the Romans and some others. And then, so the beast, that hasn't been mentioned yet here, he's going to represent the persecuting imperial power of Rome. Goodness gracious, sorry. And this beast is also going to give his followers a certain mark also that's going to be on their forehead and in their palms. But like I said, those marks are just a pale counterfeit to the mark that Christ has already given to his followers. We'll definitely talk more about the mark of the beast when we get to chapter 13. It's not your credit card. It's not your social security number. It's not the barcodes that are on the back of your toothpaste. It's not any of those things. Those are not, and joke as we might, people have proposed all those various things. Social security numbers. Oh, that's it. Got to be FDR was the beast. Then all the other things that come along, oh, this has got to be it. Oh, this has got to be it. Well, when we get to chapter 13, we're going to find out it's all done. It's something that happened really almost 2,000 years ago. It's a good story. Well, then we move along and we get there to the next verses, and we find that we have a number that is given to us of all these people who represent the family of God. The first number is 144,000. 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Now, it's interesting to note here that these 12 tribes that are listed here in verses 5 through 8 aren't the same tribes that are listed like in Joshua in after the Exodus and during the occupation of Palestine, Canaan. And there's a reason why. Well, because in the ancient world, during the patriarchal period of Israel, the tribe of Levi was not given land. They were the priestly tribe. They stayed at the holy places, at the shrines and in the temple, and that's where they were. They weren't a part of the confederation. Neither was Joseph's did the tribe of Joseph. Rather, the tribe of Joseph was split among his two sons, and so you still had 12. One of Joseph's sons takes the place of Levi. The other of Joseph's sons takes the place of Joseph. Now, there's a point to the way that John lists this. And one of those is that John, in Revelation, is talking about the spiritual confederation of Israel. He doesn't list the others that we would find in Joshua, for example, because that is a political confederation. He's not being political. And remember, as we've talked about in early classes, the people of Israel tended to keep looking for this messianic government that was going to be there. And so John, even as late as he's writing, is still saying, stop looking for a political organ. The kingdom of God is not political. It's spiritual. So he uses the cultural, ancestral naming of the tribes instead of the political naming that we have like in Joshua. So the confederation isn't what John's talking about. He's talking about the culture, the religion, the family of Israel. He's talking about the family of God. He's being not political, but metaphorical. The believers are from every tribe of the people of Israel, and it's a graphic reminder of the continuity between the Old Testament and the New, the people of Israel and the church. He's showing that what was started then that was the way it was supposed to be started, but now it has continued. There were those in the early church, and some even want to read Paul this way, as saying, God is done with Israel, and now he's on with the church. That's a misreading of Paul, and it's certainly John is not trying to say that. No, he's saying what began continues through. Began with Israel, continues through to the church. So, to show that, he'll then go on to another number. But before we get there, the 144,000, not only is it 12,000 times 12, which is fascinating in itself, because anytime you use thousand in Scripture, it doesn't mean one after 999. It just means a whole lot. So it's not necessarily the 144,000. It means just so many people. But it's the 144 that's important. Now, in Hebrew, the letters all have numeric values, right? The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph, which is like our A, and it has a numerical value of 1. The second letter is Beth. It has a value of 2. The next one, on and on and on. Anyway, so each of the letters have numerical values. Here's a fun thing. You take the name or the word father in Hebrew, and the numerical value is 3. You take the name mother or the word mother, and the numerical value is 41. You take the name child or the word child, Yeled, and it's 44. 3, father, plus 41, mother, equals 44, child. Kind of cool. Is it intentional? You bet it is. The thing is that when it was originally written, Hebrew wasn't the letters, the square letters that we see now. They were actually more like pictograms. In fact, the Hebrew word for father is Ab, and it comes from Aleph, the first letter, which means strong. The second letter, Beth, means house. You take those two words and put them together, it's the strong one of the house. That's the father in their patriarchal society. So you could actually look at the Hebrew letter as it was written originally, and it's an ox head. It's, the kind of the oval face of an ox with horns on it, and that's the father, the strong one. Well, so you could actually kind of translate Hebrew without really knowing about a whole lot of Hebrew in some of those early writings. Then, of course, they wind up adopting the Aramaic script, square script, and everything changed. But the values still stayed the same. Now, I'm telling you all that to tell you about the 144. And I never bothered to go through the whole Bible and count up all the numbers. Good grief, I'd still be doing it. But I was talking with a guy who is a Jewish number theorist one time, and we were talking about the numbers in the Hebrew Bible. And we were talking about Ab, and its numeric value of 3, and mother and child and all like that. And he was like, well, there's so many words that do this. Now, he's Jewish. He is completely unaware, not completely unaware. He is unfamiliar with the book of Revelation, because being Jewish, it doesn't mean a whole lot to him. So he goes, well, and it's like the Garden of Eden is 144. And I went, hold on. It's what? He goes, yeah. Now, this is how good he was. He takes out a piece of paper and he starts writing out really fast in Hebrew. And he was like, yeah, because this is it. And he's doing all the numbers and putting the numbers underneath and totaling them all up. And he goes, see, so 144,000. I'm like, well, that's in the book of Revelation. He went, yeah, maybe, I don't know. And he kept going, stop, I want to talk about this for a minute. He goes, Travis, I don't know anything about the book of Revelation. I know it scares a lot of people, but I don't know about it. And I'm like, okay, well, keep talking, and I'm going to try to pay attention, but I want to get back home. And, you know, so sure enough, I went back and dug it up because, I mean, it's not that I didn't trust him, but I want to be able to say I counted it up myself. And sure enough, it comes out to 144. That's been the point of the whole book of Revelation so far, is the restoration of paradise. Remember, we talked about the white stone being put in our hands. And what is the white stone? But it's the stone beryl, which is one of the stones that you would find in the Garden of Eden. Or he talked about the secret manna, that manna was described as having the color of beryl, which was one of the stones of the Garden of Eden. So there is this theme running throughout Revelation that we can see if we pay attention, that we're talking about restoring paradise. Now, leap forward to chapter 21, and what does John hear the voice of the risen Christ saying? Behold, I make all things new. I make everything, not I make all new things. I make all things new. I make everything the way it was supposed to be. That is the whole promise, is that what we were meant to enjoy will be restored to us. What we were meant to be caretakers of will be restored to us. That's good news. And it's all written out here in very, very colorful, figurative, numerical language. So the verses 9, that's right, I was lost where I was, verses 9 through 17 talks about another great multitude that John says nobody could even count. He says, after this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands. So before you had, this was kind of addressing the Jewish Christians, those who were descended from the Jewish nation, and this 144,000 representing the multitude from every tribe, 12,000 from every tribe. But now he says, but it doesn't stop there. I saw more people than just the 144,000. Now, people have tried to take that 144,000 and make it ironclad, and in fact, there is one group, let's call them who they are, the Jehovah's Witnesses originally said in the beginning of their group that we represent the 144,000. And it was an ironclad number that it's 144,000 of us. So, of course, you want to go, so when your membership reached 144,001, what happened to that poor person? Well, now it becomes a symbolic number. Now it's like, well, these are the 144 of the truly elect, and now you start wind up dividing into, different castes of membership in the group. You have those who are truly the elect, and then you have, all those others who came there. Or as some people put it, you have the 144,000 who get to participate in the wedding banquet of the Lamb and the bride, and the rest of them are servants. Check, please. Yeah, I guess it's better to at least serve there, so at least Satan in John Milton's Paradise Lost was wrong, where he says better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. Nah, that's okay. I'd rather serve. I'll take serving. Anyway, so now this multitude that nobody can count, people from every nation, all tribes, peoples, and languages. So it shouldn't be, number one, Because at the conclusion of that verse, they were robed in white with palm branches in their hands. Now, that doesn't take a whole lot of a stretch of the imagination to see the connection with the palm branches and the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. But here are these who cannot be counted. Now, these are not Jewish Christians. These are from every nation, from every tribe, every people, every language. The 144,000 is referencing this multitude that comes out of the Old Covenant, we'll say, out of the Hebrew Bible, the nation of Israel, the religion of Israel, the nation of priests, as they were called, and those Jewish Christians in the first century felt very assured by all that, while the great multitude is from every group. And John is actually seeing this an international and unlimited group of people that reminds us of in chapter 5 where he talked about the myriads of people that he saw. And in the same way that we saw the transition of or transformation of the lion into the lamb in chapter 5, here in chapter 7, we see the Jewish Messiah and the people of Israel being transformed into the universal Christ and the universal people of God. There is something miraculous that's taking place there. And these visionary symbols, well, John is talking about universal salvation in this spot. And I'll arm wrestle Gary Meyer to the ground if I have to over that. A friend of mine who's also a teacher, he shakes his head when I talk about that stuff. And he was like, but it's limited salvation. And I'm like, no, it's not there. It's just not there, Gary. I met him for coffee yesterday.
Oh,
yeah, we still argue about that. So I said, so anyway, so verse 13 now takes an interesting turn because John says that one of the elders came to him and said, hey, who are these people? And John's kind of like, you ought to know. You're the one with the answers. Well, that's clearly a rhetorical question if there ever was one. Mm-hmm. Sir, you are the one who knows. Then the elder answers him, and he says, these are those who have come out of the great ordeal. We call it the Great Tribulation in some places, and that the tribulation will get mentioned again. But remember, in our first class, I think, we talked about don't look at these things as they progress as following a timeline. It's not. Remember, this is more of a spiral than it is a straight line. So we're going to revisit, just like we revisit the myriads of myriads and the multitudes that can't be counted, and we see the lamb and the lion in all these different ways. We're going to see this great tribulation too, or the great ordeal. And of course, people still want to talk about some tribulation that's going to be coming our way because they keep trying to have a future reading of Revelation. Now, if you want tribulation, you'll find somebody to give it to you. But whether or not it is the same thing that was endured by the church is a whole other matter. I know. Because some people can't discriminate against one group or another. They feel like their Christian values are being trampled on. I would ask them to question their Christian values. I don't think discrimination falls into that description. But they call it persecution, and it's not. You want to talk about persecution? Talk about the mother who is watching her husband and children being crucified, and she is told, if you will just recant, if you will renounce Christ, we'll save them. That's persecution. You talk about poor, what was her name? Blandina, who was boiled in oil That's persecution. You talk about so many of the other martyrs who were fried on iron skillets where the fire was underneath, and they were chained onto these flat iron pieces while the fire, so they feel the heat growing until it absolutely cooks them. And the thing is that the Roman persecutors were like, why are they not recanting? Why are they not? It's like when, go back to one of my favorite of the early church figures, Polycarp, when they said, why don't you renounce Christ and save yourself? And his answer was, how can I renounce Christ who has been so kind to me for 80 years? How can I possibly do such a thing? The Romans never got it. And that's why they don't understand the values of Christianity, because Roman values was all about acquisition and power and domination. And who is the lion that we see here? It's the Lamb. And that's why I love the phrase that talks about, we talked about it last week, last time or the time before, that great phrase that talks about the wrath of the Lamb. Just how wrathful can a lamb really be? What is the wrath of the Lamb except kindness and patience and endurance and forgiveness? That's the wrath of the Lamb. And that's why we don't see him now being called the Lion of Judah. No, because we know the wrath of a lion. No, we see this remarkable transformation that the Messiah, the Christ, is the Lamb, whose wrath is mercy and kindness and forgiveness. Well, so he says then, sir, you're the one who knows. Then the elder says, these are the ones who've come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, they are before the throne of God and worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them or any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to the springs of the water of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Kind of looking forward to that. There's so many images, so many great metaphors and symbols to unpack here in these 4 verses. These are the ones who came out of the Great Tribulation. We talked about that. The persecution of the church at the hands of Rome. These are the faithful people of God who are now identified as the martyrs. They're the victorious ones who are in the heavenly world. Like Jesus, they've conquered, not by violence, but by having given their lives. Their conquest was peace. Their conquest was surrender. Their conquest was trusting God to take care of them. And in the end, it says that God will shelter them there in his temple. The fact that they are too numerous to count must have been a source of considerable comfort and hope for the small fledgling early church. The early church was not a massive amount of people. Even by the end of the first century, sure, there were thousands of Christians, but they still were a small number. I think that in John's own time, that the Christians represented, there was 1.6 Christian for every 1,000 pagans, Roman citizens. Okay, so we're not talking about 1.6%. We're talking about 0.16%. Goodness gracious. For every 1,000 Romans, for the population of Owen, there was 1 Christian. I know that argument can still be made today. Daryl says that's a little high, I think. It's so for that reason alone, the 144,000 seems unimaginably large for the fledgling church. Not to mention the multitude that no one could count. That was just massive. And it was great comfort, again, to the people who were hearing about this. Yeah, there's 144,000 people like us. And then there's so many more that we don't even know about. So rather than thinking only of their own tiny congregation, whether in Ephesus or Pergamum or Thyatira or Philadelphia or any of the rest of them, or any of the other churches who would read the book of Revelation, John's readers are reassured that they are part of something much, much larger than just themselves. That the Church of God spans all centuries, all cultures, all continents. In fact, it reminds us of C.S. Lewis saying in his book, The Screwtape Letters, that the church doesn't see itself as it is. And he says, which is spanning all space and time, more terrible than an army with banners. We don't see ourselves that way. We see ourselves as the few who are collected together in the four walls. Sometimes even forgetting about the other few who are just across the street. The other few who are in the neighboring town. The other few, but there winds up being a multitude that no one can count. And that, pardon me, and that is what John is trying to press home to these folks who are hearing him and reading him. So their suffering and their endurance have gained them the white robes, the robes of the martyrs, and John says that now they worship the one on the throne, seated day and night. And then he adds this great phrase, within his temple. That's just a good phrase that is, John doesn't waste any language. And when he inserts something in here, he's painting a picture that it's not just us in various churches or gathering together in parks or as Daryl and Lois trying to have church in the bar down the street. It's not just that. It's not the place that those who have overcome, those who are in the white robes, those who have been martyred, those who are finally seeing God as God is, they're within the temple. They're inside God's temple with God. How wonderful. And then the one who is seated on the throne, John says that God will shelter them. The protection that they felt outside of, the protection that they felt, where was it? That now they know for certainty, of a certainty, that God has always been their shelter, but now this becomes their home. This is the place where they will worship God. They have now come under the protection of the presence of God, and hunger and thirst and heat will no longer affect them. Using that heat, the scorching sun, nor will anything burn them, it is also referencing the persecution. Because by this time, Christians were already being burned at the stake. They were already being fried in the pans. They were already, in fact, John himself, legend tells us, was boiled in oil. So many of the disciples suffered unimaginable torment at the hands of their persecutors. The Romans, yes, but also other places that they had gone to. We hear about poor, I think it was Philip, who wound up being skinned alive and then crucified. The horrible things that happened to even the disciples. And so John, having survived strangulation and beatings and boiling in oil and all these other things, John is like the Terminator of the 12. Nothing seems to kill him. which to me, I think we've said it before in another place, is probably the saddest fate of all. The one who is so close to Christ, just like Mary Magdalene, who is so close to Christ, they don't die by martyrdom. They have to live. You know, Paul says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Well, James was the first one to die. James, the brother of John, the first one to die. In fact, we see him die in the book of Acts. And he's immediately gone to be with the Lord. Simon Peter, Andrew, all the rest of them wind up dying. But those who were closest to him, their fate was to live on and on and on without them. I'm sure that they would have welcomed being in the presence of the Lord. And yet, that was their call, was to continue living on without. So, John is almost looking at the folks who have been martyred as, you lucky ones. You're the ones who, and here I am, stuck on Patmos, looking out over here, over the Aegean Sea, exiled from my home in Ephesus. So it's not so bad. The persecution is terrible, but look where you wind up. In the presence of God, before the throne room of God, in the temple with God. And then comes one of my very favorite symbols, and I know every week I have a different favorite, so just bear with me on this one. But I love this phrase here, this great symbol. It says, "For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd." The Lamb will be their shepherd. Just pause for a second how remarkable, how marvelous that is. I mean, it's lambs who need a shepherd. It's the lambs who need to be taken care of. But here, the Lamb is going to shepherd them. If this isn't a marvelous example of the last shall be first, I don't know what is. Mm-hmm. The one who seems to be the weakest, the one who has surrendered himself the most, this is going to be the one who is going to lead them to the water, the springs of the water of life, it says. This goes against everything we know about sheep. And yet, John says, the Lord will be the shepherd. That passage concludes with the great line, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Mm-hmm. It's a phrase that is borrowed from the book of Isaiah, and John once again uses that to show the continuity that what God had promised in the Hebrew Bible is still being promised today, his time, and to our time, that there will come a time when God will wipe away every tear from our eyes. It was begun among the ancient Israelites, and it continues and concludes with the work of Christ. Wow, what a remarkable passage. So John is now giving us this moment to pause and have a look, okay, before the action moves on. And remember, the seventh seal, when it's opened, is only going to be a transition into the next seven things, the seven trumpets. So this is the pause before we transition into something else. But what a remarkable vision. And again, the wrath of the Lamb becomes the shepherd. The Lamb is if that doesn't tell us what our God is like, I can't think of anything that would convince us. It's not a God of wrath. It's not a God of vengeance, as we think of vengeance, because actually the Greek word that is used for vengeance is an accounting term that just means balancing the books. We always want to read it as revenge, that God is going to get those who did us wrong, and I've got a list. Only to find out, no, that's not how it works. It doesn't work that way at all. Don't worry. The things that they're going to be balanced out. That's the vengeance that they're talking about, is that we just want everyone to know that God is our God and that our God is real. That's the vengeance that they're looking for. They're not looking for torments on anybody. They're not looking for anybody, but that's anti-Christian behavior right there. That's nothing like Christ ever teaches. What Christ is the one who told us, and this is going to be our text this Sunday, is when somebody pops you on the right cheek, hammer them right between the eyes. Oh, no, wait. That's the Rocky version. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, he says, then turn them to the left. But here's the thing about that, is that we always turn that into some kind of a wimpy, hippie kind of, oh, sorry, just go ahead. Here, here, hit me again, harder, which is not it at all. Think about it. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, then they either have to hit you with their left hand, but wait a minute. In the ancient world, especially the ancient Near East, you don't touch somebody with your left hand, because your left hand is the hand that does the dirty work. All I can think of to say it. It's the hand that is used to wipe your backside. And there ain't no toilet paper in the ancient world. So you don't touch somebody with this hand. I don't care if it's an enemy. I don't care who it is. You don't touch somebody. So then if I'm being struck on the right cheek, that means that they're having to backhand me. And that is a mark of superiority, of your, a backhand is always done to an inferior or someone you perceive to be an inferior. So Jesus is saying, don't take it like that. Don't let someone treat you like an inferior. When they want to do that, you stand up and you take it like a champ and say, this side, you're going to have to punch me. It's going to take either an open hand slap this way or a punch that way. He's saying you don't accept a place as secondary citizens. He's telling the disciples that. Don't stand there in the Jewish community and in the synagogues and let them treat you as something second class. Don't stand for it. Mm-hmm. Do you take it? Yes, you take it. He's still saying get hit. So win, lose, or draw, you're going to get hit in this. But he's saying that, okay, it's like when the sons of Henry II were, and I think this is one of Shakespeare's plays, the sons of Henry II were in the prison in the Tower of London, and they're coming along and they're going to kill them. They're going to execute. There's Richard I, who winds up being called the Lionheart. There's Henry III. There's Prince John. They're standing there. And so John is all quivering down there, and Richard tells him, you stand up. Stand up and take it like a man. And John says, if a man's going to fall, what does it matter how he falls? And Richard's answer is, when the falling is all that's left, it matters a great deal. What a great line. And which is really kind of Shakespeare quoting Jesus in a backhanded way. No, I didn't mean backhanded. I didn't mean that. But in an unorthodox way. Is that, look, if you're going to get it, don't take it like a slave. Not a slave to these people. A slave to God? Absolutely. Servant of God? Absolutely. But don't relegate yourself to something less than. You're not less than. Anyway, that was a side note, and I don't know why I said it. Anyway, so here we are now with these folks who are seeing a vision of hope for themselves, and now John says, now, let's get cracking back with the seals and the trumpets, and let's have some more fun. And they're like, okay. So it was kind of, again, an interlude that really built the tension, because now they know there's more coming, and we'll see what's going to be coming next. So 2 weeks from now, we will move on to John chapter 8 and the seventh seal, and then the trumpets that come along after this.